Listen,
Okay, we're going again.
Charlie, you do what I say or I'll report you to Mac. You stand up right now, you pick up this hose, and when I say begin, you sprinkle the road.
I could do a lot more with that hose than sprinkle the road. What could be funny?
2 months and you think you know everything. Look, Charlie, I'm the director, and this is not a picture about being funny with a hose.
You're right. But it could be. Chaplin!
Alright, we're back. This is Nigel.
And this is Jose.
And this is Charlie Chaplin's first two-reel comedy, Mabel at the Wheel, released April 18th, 1914.
2 days after Charlie Chaplin's birthday. He was born April 14th.
16th.
16th. Oh, that's true. Good thing these aren't commentaries about mathematicians. Yeah. This film was directed by Mabel Norman.
And Max Sennett.
Mabel was only 20 years old.
This is Chaplin's first shot there, which is pretty inventive for the times, I'd say.
Him riding a bike. Which
you know there was a car behind him following him filming that shot.
What's really cool about Chaplin is you really get to see, and especially throughout his film career, you really get to see a lot of his special talents. For example, in this one you see him riding a bike, you see a lot of films of him riding roller skates, or you see films of him dancing ballet or playing the violin. So here he is on his bike. I don't know what that is.
Is that a vintage? That's a vintage motorcycle. So if the Terminator went back to 1914, this is what he had to have stolen to find John Connor Sr.
So something interesting Nigel and I were talking about before this movie. This movie was directed, as we said, by Mabel Norman, and it's because of this movie that led Charlie Chaplin to begin directing movies. The next movie that he would make would be the first movie he would direct. You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, the next film he made was 20 Minutes of Love, and basically what happened was, during the making of this movie, him and Mabel came into a disagreement about a couple gags, and Charlie wanted to add gags that Mabel and George Nichols, one of the other directors at Keystone, told him there was no time for. No time to add anything, is what he would always say. So Charlie and Mabel got into it a couple times, even though they really respected each other, and Mabel actually helped Charlie become natural in front of the camera during his first year at Keystone. And they were actually really good friends, and they respect each other quite a bit. But they had their disagreements as well, as this bike ride will explain. Oh. Right there.
It makes you wonder if he did that on purpose. There he is enjoying himself saying, see? Now, what's interesting, and it's something you read in Chaplin's autobiography when he's talking about this period in this film, is that he had all these ideas for film. He wanted to be more than just your normal gag, and one of the things that Nigel and I talk about a lot, especially in some of the other commentaries, that Chaplin, there was something inside of him that in this year of Keystone he was discovering. And I think it was at this point of his life, he already made a few films, he was realizing that there was more. He wanted to take, I felt like inwardly he wanted to take film to the next level.
To another level, yeah.
And being under, and I think the word that he uses, that he didn't feel that Mabel was competent to direct. And I think is that Chaplin saw something farther and deeper than anybody in his time did, which eventually would lead to films like The Kid, City Lights, or even earlier films like The Vagabond, that were taking comedy and drama and putting together and taking these more complex storylines. But
well, I don't think Mabel, was necessarily against that kind of thing. It was just that kind of thing hadn't really been happening yet. And at Keystone, they had such a assembly line way of making movies that we made 2, 3, 4 movies a week, and we didn't have, just get them out.
It's all they knew.
And that Chaplin ended up being the opposite of that. Chaplin would take years to make a movie, and 70, 80, 90, 150, 200 shots, the same shots done over and over and over again until he got it right.
Which City Lights has the record for the scene that has the most takes. It's a few hundred takes.
A couple hundred, yeah.
Yeah, and so which is amazing. But here,
Charlie's playing Ford Sterling character, almost. But look, you can see he's got the tramp mustache on, but he's got a little extra on the bottom, so he's not the tramp.
Which is difficult because they're forcing him to be a character that he's not. In fact, they're not even wanting him to act, they're wanting him to imitate. They're wanting him to be somebody else. And I think, you read this, especially you see this in his biography, his autobiography, is that he felt trapped. And I think the thing about Chaplin, he was such a visionary and so ahead of his time that the people around him, it's not that they were bad. It's kind of like you said, they were blinded in their vision of they only knew what they could see. Chaplin saw so much more.
Yeah.
And I think once he took hold of film, he takes it to a whole other level.
That's true. I agree. This film is actually like a real turning point in his career. It's from where he went from being the new guy at Keystone to directing
the face of the world
and being the star at Keystone.
Now, what's interesting, one of the things I noticed about this film, some of the most overacting facial, some of the biggest over facial acting I've seen Chaplin do. It's really exaggerated. I mean, it's just so different. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Once again, I feel like he's playing Ford Sterling.
Yeah.
And I mean,
almost like a devilish face, almost. Yeah.
I love this film for that reason, because it's kind of a unique beast. But from Chaplin's point of view, you look at this and you think, the films he was making up to this, it's almost like he's playing his Making a Living character again, which was his first screen appearance, which he hated. It almost feels like he took one step forward and then he's taken 2 steps back.
Yeah, and then once he really takes control of the camera, he really begins to develop his sense of self in front of the camera, but also directing, holding the camera. He really begins to get that sense of self, which is I think he was looking for, and it's difficult when you're under the direction of other people. And I think the other thing,
Charlie was also the new guy.
Yeah.
So he had,
there's Chester Conklin, by the way.
He had a lot of guts to, at this point, as new as he was, start standing up to these people. I mean, Mabel was Max Sennet's girlfriend.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting that thinking about,
I wonder what those bricks were made out of, by the way.
Chaplin, his issue was the gags, and he felt like, now, I'm paraphrasing, but that the gags needed more depth. What I think is interesting, especially a lot of these old films, people have this idea that slapstick was just this, it's just nonsense going crazy, but Chaplin really saw more than slapstick. He wanted depth in the film. And what I love about Chaplin, I think makes the greatness of Charlie Chaplin, is that he can take something like a slapstick comedy and say there has to be more depth. There needs to be a little more...
a reason behind it.
Yeah, not just, a reason. There needs to be a little more intricacy. And I think he was really the first in the sense to take film and say there has to be something more here. And he connected the audience with what was going on. It was more than just comedy, but he started making you think and feel, and for the first time you start really connecting with the characters on screen. They're more than just crazy people going nuts. There's emotion here. You find yourself on the screen. Once
again, here's a Keystone film being made at a public event. A lot of free extras.
Notice the guy towards the right that's kind of leaning back. He's definitely an extra. They're kind of laughing, looking like, what's this guy doing? At this point, Chaplin's not very well known.
I wonder if he was becoming well known. I mean, this is at least like his 9th or 10th film. So I'm sure there were people there that recognized him, even in the getup that he was in this film. Now you'll notice in the Robert Downey Jr. movie that when they have reenactments of this movie, Charlie is dressed as the Tramp, which is a little inaccurate, but if they put him in this outfit, they'd have to explain why he was in that outfit, and I don't think it would make a lot of sense to a lot of people. But
as long as he wasn't dressed as Iron Man in the Chaplin film, I'm okay. Now, you see that guy with the big pin? I wonder if that's a voting pin, like a presidential pin, or maybe for one of the drivers or something.
There's a gangster back there.
And I love how all these people, like, here he is, like, getting into a fight, and everybody just sitting there watching as if, like, look at the people just, like,
just staring at him,
yeah, they're, like,
they're really, like, serious about it. So I bet you most of the people in this shot are Keystone actors, but the ones surrounding them probably are not, I would say.
What do you tell people? It's like, hey, just keep watching the race and don't mind us.
But, obviously this is a rare event, Charlie playing a character like this, and this is really the last time he would do this, because after him and Mabel got into this scuffle, he pretty much refused to do these kind of movies anymore. So this is a nice film. This is really a stepping stone and a turning point to Charlie from becoming someone who is taking direction from other people to something he would never do again.
Now, what was Mabel? What is the future of Mabel Normand's career? Like, how does it progress? Or
Mabel,
degress?
after Charlie left Keystone, Mabel went on to make a bunch of movies with Fatty Arbuckle.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Really, really famous, popular films. Max Sennett actually bought Mabel her own studio and named it the Mabel Norman Studios. She went on to make a couple more features, Mickey and The Extra Girl. And then, of course, later on in the 20s, she became part of this big scandal, one of Hollywood's first murder scandals, which I won't get into here because it's so much to talk about. And then she died in the early 30s from tuberculosis.
Wow, what a poor, miserable life.
But I mean, she was one of cinema's first directors, or female directors.
So she's
a trailblazer in her own right, and she did a lot of great things for film.
And fairly young.
And the fact she was only 20 years old, yeah.
Which is amazing. I mean, here she is directing. And then you got to think, here's Chaplin, 24 years old.
Taking direction
from a 20-year-old girl.
A 20-year-old girl, yeah.
In 1914.
Which makes it even worse, yeah. But what's cool about this is, once again, like Kid Auto Races at Venice and Gentlemen of Nerve. Here's a real event, that real people were at and enjoying. And the Keystone crew just takes off and heads down there and they make a movie there.
It was almost like the Kid Auto Race in Venice all grown up.
Extreme, yeah. A more extended version of Kid Auto Races. Like I said, Mabel was directing this film and her and Charlie got into it. And Max Sennett had to step in to help finish the film because he didn't want his girlfriend and Charlie getting into any more arguments.
Now, one thing that's amazing, if you compare this to Chaplin's first two films, especially Kid Auto Race in Venice, there's so much more depth. The storylines have become a little more complex, and you're not only seeing the development of Charlie.
Watch this shot. This is a really interesting watch. There's a little TNA for 1914. But look at this shot, though. Charlie's reaching into the frame, and it cuts to Mabel and it cuts back to him. Those were inventive things back then. We take stuff like, we take stuff like that for granted today, but...
That's a pretty big mustache. It's Avatar, 1914.
There's Max Sennett. Maybe he said, if I have to step in to direct this one, I might as well be in it too.
Oh, what I was saying is...
Was that the Mummy up there?
It's amazing. You're seeing these films really begin to develop in depth. Before it was just Chaplin running in front of cars, now there's a story plot. So we're not just seeing the development of just Charlie Chaplin films. We're seeing really the development of film itself, where they're starting to become more of a plot, more in-depth action going on, rather than just, like we said, just slapstick.
This is, I think, the Vanderbilt Cup, I think is what this was. I may be wrong, but I feel like that's correct. But think of it this way.
We'll that later.
This story was so intricate that they had to make it into a two-reeler.
Wow. And
all of Chaplin's films up until this point had just been one reeler, 6 to 9 minutes long.
Which is, it's amazing. This is the beginning of, I think, of intricacy in Chaplin films, where there's a lot of stuff going on. That was a pretty
intense fall.
Yeah, that was a pretty intense scene right there.
Yeah, I don't know how Charlie didn't. I mean, I'm sure that they hurt themselves more than they let on, but I'm surprised how they weren't bruised and battered all the time.
It's amazing how he does his own stunts, and one of the things that's to note, Charlie Chaplin, from what I've read before, is Jackie Chan's hero. And one of the things Jackie Chan is known for, he does the majority of all of his stunts. And as we know, Chaplin did all of his stunts. All the crazy things, all the falls, all the stuff you see him do, he does himself.
This is essentially, you look at Charlie's character here, it's essentially a stock silent movie villain.
Yeah.
Or a cartoon, like the old cartoon villains that would, twirl their mustaches. And push somebody off a cliff or tie somebody to a railroad track.
This is the scene that him and Mabel got in a fight for. She just wanted him to stand and water the road to, to slow down the villain's car?
To make the car crash.
And he said his idea was to stand on the hose and look at it, and then when he realized something was wrong, he would take his foot off and he would squirt himself. And what happened is she got mad at him, and he stormed off and sat on the opposite side of the street. And
he got sick of being told what to do, and if he thought he had a really good gag or something funny he could add to the movie, he'd be told that his ideas weren't important, and they needed to just finish the movie and get it out. So at this point was when Charlie just stood his ground and said, listen, I'm going to either try these things out, or I can go home. One or the other. And he almost got fired. He was worried he was going to get fired after this film was over. He even sent a letter to his brother Sidney and said, I may get let go. And Sidney goes, oh, you had a pretty good run.
If only they knew what was coming.
If only he knew.
And,
but it's interesting that they talk about this in the Robert Downey Jr. film. You know, and in that film, it makes Mabel Normand, played by Marissa Tomei, by the way, it makes her look like her and Charlie hated each other. But they really didn't. They really got along quite well, and they respected each other. So that's kind of an inaccuracy that persists because of that film.
And that's something that Chaplin talks about, is that they had their run-ins, or, you know, their head-buttings. But he said that he does talk about they really did respect each other, and he thought Mabel was a sweet girl. I think the thing...
At one point, I think, either in his autobiography or another book, they mentioned that Charlie and Mabel, after, when she was broken up with Sennett for a while, even considered dating. But, so, Charlie, you know, Charlie tried it with everybody.
Yeah, if you were available, he gave it a shot. Especially if you were under the age of 18. Anyways.
How old was Lita Gray when this movie was being made? Let's see. I don't know. 6 years old? 7 years old?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we have plenty of time to get to Lita Gray.
That's kind of funny. We have plenty of time, and she'll be 16 when we get to her. Now, notice the quality of that shot right there was a little weaker. Wonder if they used a different kind of camera. Now here, what was supposed to be going on? He was supposed to be, wasn't he, hosing down
the road? Yeah, there's the hose behind him.
And so what happened was Chaplin kind of storms off to have a cast meeting, and him and Mabel talk, and he apologizes, and he says that very politely. He tells her, I have a few ideas, are you willing to listen? And they talked about it, and
they finally settled. Yeah.
Which was good. And I think that shows that Chaplin did respect her. But he was such a visionary, I think he just felt like he was being held back by the people around him.
And, you know, I know how it feels. If you think you have a good idea and people aren't listening to you, you get frustrated.
It's kind of like,
you get irritated.
It's kind of like every time you ask a girl on a date and they say no, you think you got a good idea, you feel like a visionary, but they just don't see what you see, right?
I'm sure Chaplin can relate to that as well.
But
here's the famous hose scene.
All she wanted him to do was hose it, just to hose the road, but he wanted to make that more intricate. He wanted to take it on another word.
Dirty work on a nice clean track. That's funny.
So, and I love that. He wasn't content with just hosing the ground. He had to do something more.
But it was that little bit more that made him special. That made him stand out.
That made him not just your everyday director. Mabel still somehow got her way, though. A little bit of her way.
Well, you know, it's funny, you know, you look at this film, and then later on, Mabel and Charlie made a lot more movies together at Keystone, and they were films that Charlie directed himself. So there we go, you know, I'm sure Mabel helped him on the films later on that he directed. I'm sure she put her own ideas in. I'm sure Charlie listened. But they found a happy medium.
The happy medium is this. Let Charlie be in charge. Charles in charge, that's the happy medium.
Well, think of it this way. This is the only time in his career when he wasn't in charge.
And it's amazing how much his films changed once he took charge. Especially once he was working for United, when he was
United Artists.
Once he was producing his own films.
Well, that was half the reason. I mean, by that point, was it 1919? They formed United Artists.
Yeah.
That was basically him and D.W. Griffith and Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. They basically, that was all them standing together, the four biggest stars in Hollywood, standing together saying, we want to make our own movies our way without being told how to do them or having to answer to the bankers or the money men.
And of course the result are some of the greatest films he ever made, i.e. Gold Rush, The Circus, City Lights,
Modern Times,
The Great Dictator.
But I mean, you look at also, it's like in the late 60s when the Beatles formed their Apple company. That was the same thing. It was like, we're sick of being told by the money men what we have to do and what's marketable, and if there's good music, you know, we want to release it. We don't care. If we think it's good, whether, and that Apple label launched James Taylor and Badfinger and all these great bands.
I mean, one of the greatest inventions Apple's ever made is when they invented Steve Jobs. And of course, that's where it led to. Originality always leads to great invention.
Steve Jobs, yeah. The Tin Man, C-3PO, and then Steve Jobs was born.
But,
and then iRobot.
So here's...
So you can tell this film's a little longer than most of the typical Keystone
I wonder
films.
if Max Sennett's just bored being there.
Do you think Max Sennett looks like Dan Aykroyd at all?
Not at all.
You don't think so? In the Robert Downey
Yeah,
Jr.
that's who plays him, Dan Aykroyd. Which, one thing I gotta admit about that Chaplin film, a lot of great actors piled up in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Anthony Hopkins.
James Woods is in it.
Like you said, Dan Aykroyd,
Marissa
Robert Downey
Tomei.
Jr. Oh, that was something when I first saw that film that really struck me. It's like, there are a lot of good people.
And all those people probably loved being in that film because they probably all grew up on Chaplin.
Especially a guy like Anthony Hopkins. Which that was a really cool addition to that movie, was the Anthony Hopkins characters. It was kind of like, wasn't a real character, but I thought it was a really good way to do the film.
I mean, when you're trying to compile someone's life,
especially as long as
Charlie's was, yeah.
Wasn't there like
two-hour
movie? Play the whole movie? There was like really two extra hours, and they had to cut it down.
I've read that Attenborough shot 4 or 5 hours worth of a film that could have been used, but for movie theater purposes, they cut it down to what they did. And I was actually disappointed when they released the 15th anniversary edition of Chaplin that they didn't put out they didn't make an extended version of that movie.
Well,
because I could easily sit through a 4-hour movie of that.
And that's why neither of us have dates. But if Attenborough did things that Chaplin, he probably burned the piece of film he didn't like.
Yeah, true.
There
are photos from that film online, publicity pictures of scenes that are actually in the movie. There's a shot of Downey Jr. as Chaplin holding a dog, like they're filming A Dog's Life. That scene's never in the movie. So you know that out there somewhere is footage from that movie that's never been
I'm sure
inserted.
one day it'll be released, but Attenborough needs some extra money.
After all of his Jurassic Park money has dried up.
He'll re-release it.
That's Henry McCoy again.
Free.
Seen in Mabel's Strange Predicament. Chester Conklin, Max Sennett.
Or Inception. It looks just like...
Look at these old-time racing outfits.
This guy's wearing a cardigan. It's Mr... What was the guy that used to wear the cardigan?
Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Rogers meets Dale Earnhardt.
You know they got bugs in their mouth and stuff while they were driving.
The winner.
It always strikes me as funny when they have Batman driving Batmobiles without covers on them. So it's like, Batman's going down the road at 150 miles an hour. All a villain has to do is throw a rock at him, and it goes right through his skull. Or spit on him the right way, and it puts his eye out,
Hey, look, it's Buster Keaton, the cameraman.
The cameraman.
That looks just like Buster Keaton in The Cameraman, which, for those of you watching this, if watching these commentaries has sparked your interest into silent films, another silent film actor that we highly recommend is Buster Keaton and...
Harold Lloyd.
Yeah.
Harold Lloyd, too, is wonderful.
And a great Buster Keaton film, I think it's the first movie he made for MGM, was called The Cameraman.
1928.
Phenomenal movie. Highly suggest you watch it. And that's the good thing about watching Chaplin. It opens up the door to a lot of great silent film actors. Like Nigel mentioned, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, another good one. Was it Lon
Chaney?
Lon Chaney. There's a really good movie, Laugh Clown Laugh. Another phenomenal silent film. Another really easy one to get into. And so, don't just stop here. I mean, allow Chaplin to be the gateway, the open door to really a lot of the treasures of the past of film that a lot of people have forgotten or seen, no pun intended, gone silent. But
Charlie's the gateway drug to silent pictures.
Exactly. Wow, I've never thought of it like that. Anyways, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you soon.